Hello, I am LaWanna Bradford, and welcome to another edition of Choose to Challenge, our Power of the Pen series, where we have a platform designed to elevate women who are making an impact through their message of the pen. And what we mean by that is they're pushing the envelope with messages that may be considered a little racy, a little challenging to discuss, but ones that are designed to input golden nuggets in your heart, in your mind, and in your spirit to elevate, expand, so that you can make the change and be a difference in the lives of your family, the community, the nation, and the world. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Kimberly Harden here with me today. Dr. Kimberly, how's it going?
Thank you so much for having me, LaWanna. Today's great. It's Tuesday. I think today's Tuesday, right? I think we're all kind of like messed up on the days. But you know, it's going well, and it's a privilege to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, I want to tell our audience a little bit about who is Dr. Kimberly Harden. Dr. Kimberly is a diversity strategist. She's an award-winning educator. She currently is a professor at the Department of Communications at Seattle University. She's a keynote speaker, the founder and CEO of Harding Consulting Group. And what she does is through her diversity and inclusion experiences, she helps organizations to shift their mindset and their practices from the traditional diversity and inclusion to equity and belonging. And so we're going to get into a little bit of that discussion with her book, The Allyship Challenge, and how to move beyond performative allyship and become a genuine accomplice. Yes. And we know with everything happening, especially here in the US, but around the world, the conversation of diversity and inclusion is nothing new. And now they're adding the other two letters onto the acronym. So now it's the Debbie, so belonging and inclusion. And even our president here in the US has signed an executive order to really push the government entities in improving and enhancing their efforts around diversity, inclusion, belonging, and access. So I want to ask you, Dr. Kimberly, what made you write this book, but particularly at this time?
So I've been doing DEI work, DEIB work, adding in the belonging piece for many years when I was working in corporate before I became a professor. And, you know, I just felt like now was the time, because I hear so many people say that I'm an ally. And, you know, last year when George Floyd was murdered and the protests and everything happened, I was really at my wit's end, to be honest with you, where people would just come to me in the most random places. White people would come to me in the most random places and say, I'm an ally. I'm just trying to buy zucchini. I'm just, you know, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I just came from the gym. I'm just trying to get my groceries for the week. And you don't know me from Eve, and you're just going to come and blurt out that you're an ally without any context, without knowing me. And so that was very performative. And so, you know, when people start saying I'm an ally, I started pushing back a little bit and asking, an ally to whom? And what have you done to prove yourself as an ally? Because we can always put labels on ourselves, but that doesn't mean that it's true. And so just, you know, spending the last couple of years and just, you know, seeing how people move in these spaces, how their words and their deeds just were not matching up. And so I'm like, okay, that is very performative. If you really want to be an effective person, you need to get out of that I'm an ally mindset and do better, right? Maya Angelou says, you know, if you know better, you do better. And so that was really the impetus for me to write this book, is to teach people, show them themselves, hold up that mirror and say, okay, this is what I see you doing. And this is how you can do things differently and better if you really want to connect with marginalized communities. So that was the impetus for me to write the book.
Yeah, that's very profound. And I want to read a part from your in your introduction. You're very clear that it's not about racism, but it's about privilege. And then you said that this book is for those who have emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and courage to know that when one of us is hindered, we all are. We agree that redressing the balance of power and opportunity is not only fair, but long overdue. that creating a space for others to share their knowledge and experience elevates us all, that a wide variety of perspectives allow us to see unexpected possibilities. And I want you to just sit right there for a moment, because you're right. And I've experienced that also from my friends and from total strangers coming up. And it's like they feel this need to, I guess, pacify themselves in some way, or by letting you know that I'm with you. But you're challenging the narrative to say, well, what does that really mean? And show me how you are truly with me. Right. So can you unpackage that a little bit? Because I'd like you to define for our listening audience, in your view and experience, what is an ally? And we're going to go through the two other definitions that you give us as we lead up to accomplice.
So if you really think about it, the fact that these individuals feel comfortable enough and safe enough to come approach us, Black women, without feeling threatened, is indeed a privilege. We could not approach them in the same manner that they approach us, without them feeling threatened, without them calling the police, without them saying that they're being attacked or accosted, all of those things. That right there is indeed a privilege. For me, ally is just the people who's just primarily lip service, right? These are the people who want to protect their image. They want to protect their brand. It's all about being Instagram ready, essentially. I mean, if you want to just break it down to social media, example, that's what it's all about. In my observation is that these people just, they want to say the right thing. They want to do the right thing. And then as soon as you confront them, call them in, call them out, the tears start flowing. You're blowing things up. That's not my intention. They make a lot of microaggressive comments. And I remind people, it's not about intent, it's about impact. And if I'm telling you that you harmed me and you're still refusing to make changes, then you're an ally, because you're not hearing what I'm saying. You're still wanting to do what you want to do in the manner that you want to do it, right? That's what an ally is. These are people who are just giving lip service, and they're not really truly trying to make a change. They'll order books, they'll join book clubs, they'll, do all of those performative things. But if you ask them what their favorite part of the book was, they'll eventually say, oh, I haven't read it yet. Well, why not? Oh, Sex and the City is coming out. Right. So they make excuses about why they can't do the work. They say they'll do the work, but they really and truly aren't really engaged in doing the work.
So let me interject right there, because when I was reading your book, I took away from it that's a safe space for them, right? It feels comfortable. They feel that they are jumping on the bandwagon of morality or justice or equality by saying what they think is the right thing, and even putting up, like I think you mentioned symbolically on their Facebook, suddenly everyone had the Black Lives Matter, banner up. And I was wondering, well, where were you a year ago? Because George Floyd wasn't the first, right?
I can give you so many examples. I was getting a lot of emails and text messages from my colleagues of color who were saying, my colleagues have, they did the blackout for Black Lives Matter. They have their fist as the profile picture on social media, so on and so forth. But none of those individuals actually called to check on their Black coworkers. That's very performative, right? I would rather not put anything on social media and make those phone calls and send those text messages, even to say, I don't know what to say in this moment, but I really want to support you. How can I best support you right now? That's how you overcome that.
I have a question for you. What would you say to those companies, because I know you're focused primarily on the workplace, who during that time, and even now, especially government agencies, are, and I'm going to use the word, corralling the people of color in a room so we can hear everyone's stories. But you keep asking for the same story over and over again. It's like, how many times do you have to hear our experiences before you're willing to do something? What would you say to that? Because I personally find it insulting after a while.
Yes, it can be. It's exhausting for sure. I always ask the question, why? Why? Because the stories that you're being told now are the same stories you've heard 15 years ago. So what makes the difference? Why is it different now? Is it because of a pending lawsuit? Is it because of an EEOC complaint? What makes it different now? If you heard that same story 15 years ago and you did nothing then, what are you going to do now? And if you already know an employee is being harmed, you don't need to have them repeat the story. I think it's a way to make white employees feel some kind of way. Instead of just saying, hey, this person was harmed. This is how they were harmed. This is what we need to do to fix it. Many organizational leaders want to pull on the heartstrings. But heart only gets you so far. You got to use your head too. And so what I tell my clients is disrupt now or be disrupted. Because, this is the first time in history where there's a lot of research showing that people of color are leaving organizations in record numbers. They're starting their own businesses at record numbers. They're going in direct competition with their former employers. And a lot of them are succeeding. There's a lot of, grants and loans and different type of programs to really help minority business owners succeed. So, you need to disrupt your own internal system in the workplace, or you will be disrupted later. So choose your battle. Do you want me to help you solve this? Or do you want to just continue the path that you're on, lose thousands of employees, lose a lot of money, and then you have to start all over from scratch? And, I think people forget that word of mouth is still the best advertising mechanism, right?
Exactly.
If you work for a company and you say, oh, yeah, that's not a good company, then I'm not going to apply there. And so, again, it's about doing more than just the whole social media, Instagram, say cheese to the camera kind of thing that a lot of these organizations do as far as being an ally.
I have an example, and I'd like to know your thoughts with this. So I know one individual who, and I'm wondering where would you define her? Would she be classified as an ally? And going to your next one, or advocate? So once the George Floyd situation occurred, she has a large platform, and she decided to start interviewing women of color to hear their experiences. So week after week after week, we have these interviews. Similar stories, different faces, different times, but it's pretty much the same thing over and over again. And I wonder, what are you going to do with all of this information? I know it's promoting awareness, but I'm wondering if the people who she's trying to get to, meaning the majority, are they even tuning in at this point? Because it's, week after week, it's the same story, just a different woman.
Right. So to answer your question, you asked if I consider this person to be an ally or an advocate. I think they are an ally, but they have potential to become an advocate if done correctly. I don't know this individual, so I don't know how much research they did exploring stories before they started asking people to be interviewed. I don't know how
they're doing a lot of research and reading. They are doing that.
Okay. Well, instead of just continually inviting people to participate in interviews, just say, hey, we're going to do maybe a group conversation instead, kind of like the red table talk, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And just have an open conversation. Well, everyone around this table had this experience. What are we going to do about it? Instead of trying to build their platform of having interview after interview after interview with the same, information. So there's potential. But right now, based on what you told me, I still think that this person is still in the ally phase. Because it's not just about hearing the person's story. It's about figuring out a remedy to the situation. That's when they need to move into the advocate level. It's like we've heard, 5 stories. They all say the same thing. Now, how are we organizationally going to make changes? That's what needs to happen to become an advocate.
So let's explore the advocacy a little bit deeper, because I know once you become an advocate, then there's some risk that you're saying you're willing to take. So can you explain that to our audience?
Oh, absolutely. So an advocate is someone who, the way I like to define it, they're individuals who like to share their pie, or at least ask if you've even had pie. A lot of times, and I've seen this in real life, where someone will say, oh, Kimberly, can you take on this part of the project? And someone will be offended because, well, wait, that's my piece of the pie. Well, wait a minute. First of all, instead of you getting all Twitterfied, why don't you ask if I want to do this work, if I've done this work before, if I would like to collaborate with you on this project? And so I asked the person, I said, well, do you have pie regularly? Because maybe I've never had pie, right? Maybe I've only had access to cake. So why don't you ask me if I would at least like to try the pie? And if I find that I like the pie and there's not enough pie, then we need to figure out a way that we can go get the ingredients to make a bigger pie. To me, that seems so simple. That's what advocates do. But people are so stuck in their mindset of it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. But realistically, it's not yours. It's the organization's, right? And they can take it away just like they gave it to you. So, I always encourage people to get out of their own mindset. But also part of being the advocate is also knowing that, having that collaborative spirit, knowing that it's going to serve the greater good, and also wanting to provide opportunities for others, whether they're, a person of color, someone with a different ability, someone from a marginalized community, age, gender, all of those things come into play. All of those intersections come into play. So what are you doing to make it accessible and equitable for everyone? That's what advocates really focus on.
I had a discussion with one individual, and they said that they really support the whole Debbie initiatives, but they were concerned that if we create the equity that we're seeking, then it means that they will have to give up a piece of their pie. And basically the question was, why should we have to give up a piece of our pie so that the scales become balanced?
So I'm laughing because my first thought, LaWanna, to be honest with you, is it wasn't your pie. It was given to you, right? People from marginalized communities always have to earn their pie, whereas the majority group are always given the pie. And so, for example, I hear a lot of people say, when it comes to hiring, we don't want to lower the bar. I'm sure you've probably heard that in your line of work as well. Over the years, people say, oh, we don't want to lower the bar and bring in this person. And so when I hear that, I push back and I ask them, how did you get your job? How did you get your job? And a good 90 to 95% of the time is nepotism. So you're telling me that you don't want to lower the bar, but yet there is no bar created when you came in. Right? Nepotism is a bar. And then also the fact that, we don't want to lower the bar. Well, who created the bar? And why did you create the bar? Right? And so I work with clients to say, we need to think about triangulation. The candidate may not have all of the criteria that you have on paper. Let's go look at the paper and figure out who wrote this and is it needed? Because most of the job descriptions that are written, you don't need to have all of that expertise. Half the stuff on job descriptions, you're not going to do that as your normal job functions anyway. So let's be realistic about what's really on the paper. And then let's talk about how we are going to create an equitable model and how we're going to triangulate. So someone may not have, 15 years of, sales experience, so to speak, but maybe they did some other sales related jobs, just not in the way that you're looking for, right? There's always ways of triangulating things. And so once I explain that, most of my clients are like, okay, now I understand.
You've used the lead model, love, enthusiasm, and awareness and development in this messaging. And you mentioned that for the first two, the advocate and the ally, they tend to have the love and then the enthusiasm. But then you emphasize that they really lack development. What do you mean by that?
So when I speak to leaders and ask them what their greatest fear is, and I do have those conversations with leaders, the number one fear is I'm afraid of what I don't know. And they feel that they're in a leadership role because of their knowledge and their know-how, which of course is legitimate, but they don't want to be in a situation where that is challenged. And so they really don't want to become more aware. They don't want anyone to point out that they're lacking in certain areas of awareness. And therefore, they're not really going to take the step to become or to develop themselves to become more aware. And so part of what we do at Harden Consulting Group, I would say that half of it is probably, psychological of, what is your greatest fear? Why are you afraid? What happened in your past experience? What would happen if you became more aware? So we go down that path with executive leaders and have some open and honest conversations.
So with this book, the Allyship Challenge, is it designed for an individual to work in isolation, or is it really this groupthink approach?
It can be used as both. So when I designed it, I really wanted for people to just read it and digest and really reflect on their own lives and how they show up in the workplace, how they show up socially as well. But then to have conversations in team meetings and have some open and honest conversations. And so one thing that we did as part of this, we actually sell it separately, but we created some diversity discussion prompts. We have our team building deck. We have a young adults deck. We have an individual deck. And we also have a deck for parents to talk to their children about identity and race and all of those things as well. So our goal is to really continue the conversation. And that was developed because our clients were saying, how do we continue these conversations? How do we have these conversations at home? And so that's why we actually developed the cards. But, we really wanted to get the book out because we wanted people to see themselves in those scenarios. And so, the book has some self-reflection prompts, like the one little question at the end of the chapter. There's also case studies and then some questions that go along with the case studies of what would you do in this scenario. And so we really wanted people to just kind of sit with it, reflect on what they would do, how they have done things, and what they would do differently at this point in their lives, right? The more you grow, the more you know, hopefully. That is true for everyone, but we wanted to provide a space for people to think about what did you do previously and what would you do now or in the future if this situation would arise.
And that's one of the things I loved about your book is you gave context, but then it's about the inner work and then the practical lived application. And what you just said is so important. If we're looking to change the narrative and to change behavior for the next generation, the conversations have to come home. We have to start speaking to our children in a different way and help them to understand what does it really mean to be a society that is inclusive and one that promotes equity and diversity. Because people think, well, if I have a diverse organization, then I've checked all the boxes. But you can be diverse and miss everything else.
Yeah, and that's what I explained to clients. So in corporate world, diversity just means we're EEOC compliant. And we're all diverse. So really, the whole idea of diversity is kind of weird to me. But I know going in that it just means we're in EEOC compliance and that we have the right balance of gender and people of color and so on and so forth. So basically, that's really what diversity is. It's in the corporate world is making sure that we are EEOC compliant.
What would you say before we get into the last and most important piece is elevating to where you become the accomplice? What would you say to those who are in business for themselves, that entrepreneur, and adopting this to create strength in the collaborative networks that they're developing?
To be an accomplice, it's I'm going to be honest with you. It's challenging to be an accomplice as an entrepreneur, especially when you're just starting out and building your clientele, right? We're all going for clients. We're all trying to be financially successful, and a lot of times we don't want to turn down opportunities. But again, it's all about sitting back and reflecting and figuring out what is the best thing to do in this particular situation. And so there have been many times where I've declined opportunities, or I would start an opportunity, things wouldn't feel right. I would have some conversations, and then I would finally say, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and end this contract because we're not on the same page. And I don't want to waste your time and resources, nor do I want to waste my time and resources. It's individual. But I think everyone should just really sit back and think about how is what they're doing going to impact others. There's so many different ways of looking at that, right? There's the financial implication, there's the moral implication, there's the emotional implication. And so, every day when I go into this work, I know I have to put on my armor and fight against racial battle fatigue. But I also say, help me to figure out what I need to do and how am I going to have the greatest impact among most people. I'm not going to impact everyone, of course, but how can I have the greatest impact among most people? And that's what I strive for. And if I feel like I'm not having an impact, then I don't do it.
So that our audience is very clear, because when we hear the term accomplice, and you even mentioned this in your book, it has a negative connotation. I think your example was Bonnie and Clyde.
But so many examples. Bonnie and Clyde, Fred and Barney, SpongeBob and Squidward, Scooby and Shaggy, right? So, if you think about it, they all got into trouble together. They didn't throw each other under the bus, right?
Exactly.
They supported each other. That's what an accomplice does. It's like, if you're going to go down, I'm going down too. If you're going up, I'm going up too. That's what the accomplice thinks about.
And I think that's a very frightening space for those who are privileged, or maybe even wrestling with the whole white fragility, is stepping into that lane, because there is a risk, and you have to be willing to pay that price for the greater good, right?
Yeah, but again, it's about thinking about the greater good and the whole, right? The hidden wholeness, so to speak. And so, for example, Dan Price, CEO of Gravity Payments, you've probably heard a lot about him or have read some things about him, but he is a very popular accomplice here in Seattle, where he is the CEO that vowed to pay all of his employees 70 plus a year, even if that meant taking a pay cut himself. And he realized that it is my responsibility to make sure that my staff can feed themselves and provide for their families. Because if I don't, what's going to happen? They're going to be a drain on the system, right? They're going to have to go get EBT or SNAP benefits. They're going to have to apply for, housing subsidies and all of those kind of things. So it's either do right now, again, disrupt now, or be disrupted later. So as a CEO, we should all be thinking, how can we help our staff members, our team members, not only survive, but thrive, so they don't have to drain the system, so we don't have to pay more in taxes, so we don't have to listen to everyone complain about, those people are just getting all of the government resources. No one would have to get government resources if we just did the right thing to begin with. That's what being an accomplice is.
I love it. Dr. Kimberly, can you believe we're already out of time?
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'll have to have you come back for a part 2, because this is such a rich conversation, but I do want to give you time to speak to the audience, tell them whatever it is that you'd like to share with them about the things you're doing, how they may be able to get in contact with you. So I'll let you take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. So Harden Consulting Group is a diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging strategy company. And our goal is to break the traditional mode of DEI. Again, diversity simply means, in organizational speak, it means EEOC compliance. We help organizations go further than that and really work to create a culture of belonging. where, people talk about inclusion. Inclusion is great, but if you're at my table, you're included at my table. But if I don't ask you what you would like for dinner or ask you about your dietary restrictions, then do you really belong at my table, right? So we provide training, coaching, strategy, long-term and short-term for our clients to really develop a solid strategy on how to make substantial, sustainable change. If you would like more information, please go to hardenconsultinggroup.com, or you can always email me at Kimberly, Kimberly, at hardenconsultinggroup.com. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
This has been so great, Dr. Kimberly. I wish we had more time, but I definitely do want to have you back on this platform to really dig deep into what the U.S. is facing and globally, and what we can do individually to make a change, to be that change in our sphere of influence. And I just encourage everyone to pick up this book, The Ally Challenge. No matter where you are in the color spectrum, I think it's very, very enlightening and something that can help us, people of color, to have a more impactful and intentional conversation with those who approach us from the ally position, right?
Absolutely. And how do you confront someone at 7 o'clock in the morning when you're getting a zucchini?
Exactly. Well, thank you again, Dr. Kimberly, for joining me. I truly appreciate it. To our listening audience, you have heard another edition of Power of the Pen here with Dr. Kimberly Harden with the Allyship Challenge. I encourage you to check her out on her website, as well as you can buy this book on Amazon.com. And just remember, your voice matters. Rise up. Be an impactful disruptor to be the change that you want to see in the world. Until next time, be safe. Bye, everyone.